At the end of the 1860s, I gathered everything we had and set out with my wife and kids on a journey westward. My father was already in Nebraska, and his letters painted a picture of generous land, ready for anyone looking for a fresh start. With hearts full of hope, we crossed the Missouri River at St. Joseph and joined a wagon train along the Oregon Trail. Along the way, we realized that the idea of a great American desert was nothing but a rumor. The eastern Kansas prairies stretched out before us, vast and rich, revealing a landscape we had never imagined. After many weeks on the road, we finally reached the area where my father had settled. When we arrived, we came across a crystal-clear creek, fed by natural springs, surrounded by cliffs layered with sandstone. That place seemed to call us to put down roots and build the future we had always dreamed of. In that moment, we understood, without a doubt, why my father had been so certain when he urged us to start over. When we arrived at that place, everything felt vast and overwhelming. With the help of our neighbors, we managed to build our first home, a simple cabin with a modest loft and a stone fireplace. Compared to what we had left behind, at first it felt rough and unwelcoming. But little by little, every detail became familiar, and before long, we couldn't imagine wanting to be anywhere else in the world. As soon as we finished the cabin, we headed to the valley floor and started planting corn, potatoes, and watermelons. The soil was rich, and we believed we'd have a good harvest. But the landscape wasn't just about the crops. Wild strawberries covered the hillsides, so plentiful it seemed impossible to pick them all. One Sunday morning, my wife and I set out excitedly with our buckets, eager to make the most of nature's gift. With every step, we breathed in the sweet scent of the fruit, while stepping on just as many strawberries as we managed to gather. By the time we got back home, we realized just how much this place had become a part of us. It wasn't just the shelter or the garden. It was the feeling of belonging that grew with every decision, every harvest, every new discovery on that land. With our bucket full of strawberries, we settled onto a sun-warmed rock. As we rested, we reflected on how much had changed since we left the East. We could still taste the sweetness on our lips and feel the sticky stain on our fingertips. Then my wife pointed to the other side of the ravine. Tucked among a tangle of bushes, we spotted a patch of strawberries, bigger and redder than any we'd ever seen. Without a second thought, we rushed toward them, eager to taste something even more incredible. As I pushed my way through the thick vegetation, my foot hit something solid. I lost my balance for a moment, and when I looked down, I froze. A human skull grinned up at me from a bed of moss. My heart pounded, and at that same instant my wife stepped closer, noticing my expression. Together we saw more bones scattered around, as if this place held secrets we never expected to uncover. We found bones scattered beneath layers of fallen leaves. It didn't take long to realize that this place had once been a burial ground. In silence, we gathered all the remains we could find. There were 12 skeletons, men, women, and children, likely from a lost wagon party, with no one left to mourn their passing. We dug a grave, placed the bones inside, and built a small pile of stones to mark the spot. Later that evening, as night settled in, we sat on the cabin's porch. Exhaustion weighed on us, but we felt we had done what we could to honor the dead. That's when, from deep within the trees, the wind carried a long, low moan. The children clung to their mother, their eyes wide with fear, unsure of what might come from the darkness. I grabbed my rifle and stepped into the darkness, trying to convince myself it was just an owl or maybe a nightjar. I walked through the cornfield, searched the barn, and even followed the creek, but the sound always seemed to slip away just when I thought I was closing in on it. When I finally gave up and headed back to the cabin, I found that my family had locked the door from the inside. I stood outside for a while, trying to steady my racing heart. Over the next few nights, that eerie wail came again. Whatever it was, it wouldn't let us be. The neighbors joined us, keeping watch until sunrise, but the noise never had an explanation. Little by little, people started calling it the ghost of the lost woman, as if giving it a name would somehow make sense of something we couldn't understand. Then autumn came, and with it, the harvest season. We needed all our strength for the work, but the strange nighttime visitor kept us on edge. Even exhausted, we spent our nights awake, waiting for a sound we couldn't trace. And so the mystery lingered, hanging over us, ready to make itself known when we least expected it. When my wife suggested we spend the winter at my father's cabin near the Little Blue River, I agreed without hesitation. We left our own land behind for a while, only returning during the day to check that everything was in order. When spring arrived, we moved back for good, ready to start planting again. As soon as night fell, that familiar sound echoed once more, as if the land had been waiting for our return. One afternoon, we went to pick strawberries near the old burial site. After filling our baskets, we climbed a hillside to rest and take in the rolling hills and rocky crevices stretching out before us. That's when we spotted something unusual. At the base of a crack in the stone, there was a crouched skeleton, its arms raised as if shielding itself from a final blow. That unexpected discovery cast a new light on the land, pulling us toward the past we had unknowingly stirred awake. Carefully, we gathered what remained and placed it alongside those who had already been laid to rest. Then we searched the area for clues. That's when we found the burned-out wagons, twisted iron, and the bones of oxen still strapped to their yokes, a silent reminder of what had happened there. Among the wreckage, we spotted broken arrows, telling the tragic story of a group of pioneers ambushed and left to their fate. One question lingered: what or who had been waiting for them beyond that place? The first night I heard that voice, all I could make out was a distant wail, like someone calling for help in the darkness. It always came during the quietest hours, when everyone was already asleep. Sometimes it sounded so close I could almost feel someone standing beside me. Other times it faded into the vast prairie like an endless echo. For weeks I tried to figure out where those whispers were coming from. A few neighbors and I searched around the cabin, but we found nothing, just grass and trees. Still, the cries continued, growing deeper each night. The voice carried a mix of pain and hope, like a plea for an impossible rescue. One night, I gathered my courage and followed the sound to an abandoned patch of land. The wind blew softly, almost like a whisper, leading me down a path I had never noticed before. That's when I stumbled upon an old grave, hidden among the overgrown leaves. A name had once been carved into the stone, now worn away by time, but I could still make out the initials. They belonged to a woman. At that moment, for the first time, the wailing made sense. It was as if her soul had been crying out to be remembered. In the days that followed, everything changed. The cries stopped suddenly, as if they had served their purpose. I started to believe she had finally found peace. Maybe because, after so long, someone had finally noticed her. There was no longer an echo waking me in the night. No lingering feeling of being watched. The cabin, once haunted by strange noises, had become just a quiet home. Still, when I sit on the doorstep at night and the wind blows just right, I remember that voice. I wonder if somewhere out there it still echoes through the hills, lingering between memories and secrets that nature refuses to let go of. I can't say for sure if it was all in my head or if the ending truly brought rest to a restless soul. What I do know is that some mysteries stay with us, even when we think we've finally found peace.